The secrets to great decision-making. Throughout history, standard economic theory was dominated by the model of Homo economicus, the economic man. According to that model, humans are self-interested, intelligent, and analytical beings who can control their feelings and impulses. The economic man constantly evaluates all the facts, weighs the costs and benefits, and makes rational decisions to maximize personal well-being. This view of humans as cold and rational calculators provides a convenient foundation for economic theories. The only problem? No such person exists. The fall of Homo economicus. It turns out that people often make decisions that don't deliver the best outcomes. Sometimes we even make choices that we know will hurt our future prospects. The first researchers to study these peculiar tendencies extensively were psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. In the early 1970s, they started investigating the psychology involved in decision-making and running experiments to test their hypotheses. Over the coming years, they compiled a long list of well-documented irrational behaviors, and in 1979, they published their key paper, Prospect Theory, an analysis of decision under risk. Their findings caused a lot of controversy, especially among economists looking to protect their worldview. But Kahneman and Tversky stood their ground, and their work eventually marked the start for a new field of study. The rise of behavioral economics. Behavioral economics is a subfield of economics that studies how psychological, social, and emotional factors influence decision-making. The fundamental principle of this discipline is that people make systematic errors in their thinking. Behavioral economists have found that the vast majority of our choices aren't the result of careful calculations. Instead, we rely heavily on mental shortcuts like rules of thumb, intuition, and common sense to form judgments, solve problems, and make decisions. These shortcuts can work well in a lot of situations, but at times they also result in cognitive biases and logical fallacies, thinking errors that distort our reasoning and derail our judgment. An ancient brain in a modern world. So, why do we make systematic errors in our thinking? Why do we use mental shortcuts instead of carefully calculating our decisions? What makes us susceptible to biases and fallacies? The answers to those questions lie in our evolutionary past. Our brains have evolved for millions of years, not to maximize our well-being, but to keep us alive. For most of our history, we lived in an environment that was wildly different from modern society, and that explains why we reason the way we do. Mental shortcuts provided an efficient means for us to make quick decisions with limited knowledge in a complex world. A lot of decisions that seem irrational today served us well in the environment we evolved in. To illustrate that, let's have a look at an example. Loss aversion. People have a tendency to prefer avoiding losses to acquiring equivalent gains. In other words, we feel better not losing $10 than we do finding $10. Some research suggests that losses are twice as powerful psychologically as gains. And from an evolutionary perspective, that's a useful mechanism. For most of human history, reductions in resources could lead to death. In that scenario, it makes sense to place a higher value on preventing losses than obtaining gains. In modern-day life, however, losses rarely have the same dire consequences. And since that's the case, loss aversion no longer makes rational sense. In the past, loss aversion helped our ancestors protect their scarce resources and stay alive. But in the present, the same bias often leads to poor decisions. When investing, for example, most people keep losing stocks and sell winning stocks, even though, rationally, they should do the exact opposite. Bad decisions everywhere. Loss aversion is just one example of how the brain makes systematic errors. There are many other biases and fallacies that diminish our ability to make sound judgments and reason logically. We are fundamentally wired for mistakes, and, as a result, we make a lot of poor decisions. The evidence is everywhere. Career choices, for instance, are often regretted or abandoned. According to a Gallup report, a majority of Americans would change at least one education decision, including their choice of college, their major, or their degree, if they could do it all over again.